Come closer, my child. Do not rush your breathing. Do not try to explain what you are feeling. I already know the weight pressing against your chest, the quiet fear whispering that you have somehow wandered off course. I did not call you here to accuse you. I called you here to steady you. What you are experiencing is not chaos. It is not confusion. It is the holy hush that comes right before release. I see how you keep looking back, tracing the last few steps, wondering where certainty slipped from your hands. You say to yourself that you used to know exactly who you were, exactly where you were going. But listen to me now. Direction was never lost. What is leaving you is what never belonged to you in the first place. The strain you feel is not emptiness. It is separation. I know how unsettling it feels when familiar anchors loosen. Your routines feel hollow. Your motivations feel quieter. Even your prayers sound different to your own ears. You wonder if something is wrong with you. My child, nothing is wrong. You are shedding assignments that were placed on you by expectation, guilt, and survival rather than by me. Your spirit is finally refusing to carry what was never written into your design. Be still with me for a moment. Let me show you something you could not see while you were busy holding everything together. The heaviness you called purpose was actually pressure. The roles you called responsibility were silent agreements you made out of love, fear, or loyalty. I never asked you to bleed quietly so others could remain comfortable. I never asked you to become smaller so someone else could feel stable. You think you are drifting because the noise has changed. But peace often feels unfamiliar when you have lived in urgency. Calm can feel like loss when chaos hath been your compass. I am retraining your senses. I am teaching you how alignment feels without adrenaline, how obedience feels without exhaustion, how purpose feels when it is not borrowed. Listen carefully now. This moment you are in is sacred. It is the pause between what drained you and what will sustain you. It is the breath between chapters. And yes, it feels strange because you have never been here before. You have never allowed yourself to stop carrying what was not yours. You have never allowed me to close doors without demanding immediate replacements. I see the questions forming in your heart. You wonder who you are without that role, without that connection, without that constant proving. You fear that letting go will make you invisible, unneeded, or forgotten. My child, hear me clearly. You were never valuable because of what you carried. You were valuable because I formed you. What leaves you now leaves because it cannot follow you where you are going. If these words are resonating deep within you, if something inside you feels seen and gently undone, allow this moment to be sealed. Stay with this message. Support it, share it, and remain connected so you do not miss what unfolds next. And if your spirit feels led, write in the comments the words, "I release what was never mine," as a quiet declaration between you and me. I am not dismantling your life. I am disentangling it. What you thought was direction was often obligation. What you thought with calling was sometimes conditioning. I am removing the fog that came from carrying other people's expectations on your back. As those weights fall away, your footing will feel unfamiliar, lighter, even unsteady. That does not mean you are falling. It means you are finally standing on what is truly yours. Do not rush to replace what is leaving. Do not panic, fill the silence. Silence is where I realign you. Silence is where I whisper what cannot be heard over striving. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not failing. You are in transition, and transition always feels like loss to a mind trained to measure worth by movement. I am teaching you a new language of trust, one where you do not need constant signs to feel safe, one where you do not need to overfunction to feel secure. one where rest does not feel like guilt. You are unlearning survival and relearning sonship, relearning belonging, relearning what it means to be led rather than driven. Stay here with me. Do not judge this season too quickly. What is ending is not your future. It is your misalignment. What feels like an unraveling is actually precision at work. I am separating you from paths that would have slowly emptied you. I am protecting you from futures that look noble but would have cost you your peace. You are not losing direction, my child. You are finally letting go of what was never yours to carry. And as your hands empty, I will place into them only what fits your calling, your capacity, and your true name. My child, remain with me a little longer. I know the mind wants to label what you are feeling as loss. I know you have searched for the exact moment things shifted, replaying conversations, decisions, prayers, wondering if you misheard me. But hear this truth settle gently into your spirit. You are not lost. You are unburdened. And unburdening can feel like free fall to a soul that has carried weight for a very long time. There is an illusion that comes when familiar structures dissolve. The mind panics and says, I no longer know where I am. But the spirit knows something deeper is happening. The illusion is not that you lack direction. The illusion is that those old attachments were guiding you at all. They were not compasses. They were cages disguised as purpose. You learned early how to take responsibility that did not belong to you. You learned how to anticipate needs, manage outcomes, soften conflict, and hold everything together so nothing would fall apart. And because you were good at it, others leaned. Because you were capable, expectations grew. Somewhere along the way, what you carried began to speak louder than who you were. You mistook endurance for calling. Listen to me now. Here are paths you walked faithfully that I never designed for you to finish. There were roles you filled temporarily that tried to make themselves permanent. You were never meant to be the bridge everyone crossed without asking how much weight you could bear. And now that those expectations are loosening, the nervous system cries out, mistaking relief for danger. You feel untethered because your identity was quietly tied to being needed. When that need fades, the ego calls it disorientation. But the spirit recognizes it as freedom beginning to stretch. You are not floating aimlessly. You are being released from assignments that kept you busy but blocked you from becoming. I am showing you how much of your energy was spent maintaining things I never asked you to maintain. Keeping peace at the cost of truth. Carrying responsibility at the cost of rest. Staying loyal at the cost of alignment. You called it love. I call it overextension. And I am gently calling you back into right measure. You asked me if I am not meant to carry that anymore, then who am I now? My child, you are who you always were before you learned to earn belonging. Before you learned to stay quiet to stay safe. Before you learned to say yes when your spirit whispered no. What is falling away is not your essence. It is the performance that wrapped itself around your identity. Notice how your body is responding. The fatigue feels different now. The silence feels louder. There is a strange mix of grief and relief moving through you. That is because release always carries memory. You are not grieving the burden itself. You are grieving the version of yourself who believed that burden was required to be worthy. I want you to understand this clearly. You did not fail that path. That path expired. You did not miss your moment. That season completed its assignment. There is no punishment here. There is no demotion. There is only recalibration. And recalibration always feels like stillness before clarity. You were never meant to be everywhere at once. You were never meant to hold everyone's outcomes. You were never meant to sacrifice your inner voice to keep external harmony. And now that I am loosening your grip, the hands feel empty. The mind calls it loss. Heaven calls it preparation. Be patient with this unfamiliar peace. It will not shout. It will not rush you. It will not demand proof. It will sit with you quietly until your nervous system learns that safety does not always arrive wrapped in urgency. You are learning a new rhythm now, one that does not rely on pressure to feel alive. You may notice others reacting to your change. Some will sense the shift and feel unsettled. Some benefited from you being overextended. Some mistook your availability for obligation. You not let their confusion become your guilt. Their discomfort is not a sign you are wrong. It is evidence that something unhealthy no longer has access. I am leading you out of borrowed identities, out of roles that were shaped by circumstance rather than calling, out of patterns that taught you to confuse responsibility with destiny. The fog you feel is temporary. It is the space between who you were trained to be and who you are becoming. Trust this moment, my child. You are not wandering. You are being redirected inward so you can be led forward. What feels like the absence of direction is actually the removal of noise. And when the noise clears, the true path will not need to shout. It will feel like recognition. Stay with me. You not rush to define yourself again too quickly. Let what is not yours fully fall away. When you stop trying to hold what was never meant to stay, your hands will finally be free to receive what has always been meant for you. My child, there was a moment you did not witness with your natural eyes, but it was real nonetheless. A moment where something shifted quietly, deliberately, beyond your control. It did not announce itself. It did not ask your permission. It happened in the unseen, and its echo is what you are feeling now. This was the shadow event, the turning point that did not come with warning, but with consequence. You sensed it as a sudden heaviness lifting and an unexpected ache arriving at the same time. Relief tangled with grief, freedom braided with fear. Something was removed abruptly, not because you were careless, but because time had expired. I intervened where your heart could not release on its own. There was a connection, an expectation, a path intertwined with another soul, one you had been holding with quiet loyalty. You believed patience would eventually make it right. You believed endurance would bring clarity. But behind the scenes, what you could not see was how that attachment had begun to distort your alignment. I saw the weight before you named it. I saw how often you adjusted yourself to preserve something fragile. How you softened your truth, delayed your needs, postponed your growth so the connection would not fracture. You called it compromise. I called it self-erasure beginning to take root. The shadow event was not chaos. It was containment. I stepped in at the exact moment when staying would have cost you more than leaving. The removal you feel was not punishment. It was protection wrapped in discomfort. I severed what could no longer travel with you, even though part of you still loved what it represented. That moment may have looked ordinary to the world. A conversation that ended differently. A silence that arrived unexpectedly. A door that closed without drama. But in the spirit, it was seismic. A destiny fork appeared, and only one path preserved your wholeness. You wonder why it happened so suddenly. Why there was no gentle fade, no gradual easing. My child, some attachments cannot be slowly loosened because the heart will renegotiate itself back into bondage. I know you. I know how deeply you hope, how faithfully you wait, how often you choose potential over reality. So I acted decisively, not cruelly. There was another soul involved in this moment. A soulmate energy, fragile and conflicted, standing at a crossroads of their own. They felt the shift too, though they may not yet understand it. Where you felt confusion, they felt panic. Where you felt loss, they felt exposure. Because what was removed from you revealed something in them they had been avoiding. The shadow event disrupted their comfort. It unsettled patterns they relied on. It forced them to feel the absence of your steady presence, your emotional labor, your quiet reassurance. They had grown accustomed to you carrying more than your share. And when that stopped, something in them began to crack. But this is not about blame. This is about truth surfacing. The removal exposed imbalance that could no longer be disguised as destiny. Love that leaned too heavily. Connection that asked you to shit. Timing that favored familiarity over growth. I did not allow it to continue because it was not leading toward life. You replay the moment now, searching for what you could have done differently. You analyze your words, your tone, your choices. My child, rest your mind. The outcome was not dependent on your perfection. It was sealed by my wisdom. No alternate response would have changed what was meant to end. This is why it feels both shocking and inevitable. Your spirit recognized the necessity even as your heart resisted the finality. Something in you knew you could not keep living that way. But knowing and letting go are not the same. So I carried the weight of the decision when you could not. Do not mistake the ache for error. The pain you feel is not a sign you lost something meant to stay. It is the residue of loving something that could not grow with you. It is the grief of releasing a future that looked beautiful but would have required you to abandon yourself to reach it. I am with you in this. I did not remove something precious without preparing something holy. The shadow event was not the end of your story. It was the interruption that prevents a greater sorrow later. I stopped what would have slowly drained you and called it mercy. Sit with this truth gently. You were not rejected. You were redirected. You were not abandoned. You were extracted. What ended was not your worth, your calling, or your destiny. What ended was an arrangement that no longer honored who you are becoming. In the next movement, I will show you what began unraveling inside the other heart involved, and why their world feels unstable now. My child, while you have been learning how to breathe again in the quiet that followed, something else has been unfolding in the depths of another heart. The one connected to you felt the shift not as peace, but as collapse. What was removed from you exposed what they had been leaning on without realizing it. They did not expect the ground to feel so unstable so quickly. Your presence had been a quiet stabilizer, a steady reassurance they rarely acknowledged out loud. When that steadiness withdrew, fear rushed in to fill the space. They began to feel emotions they had postponed for a long time, emotions they had buried beneath distraction, control, or avoidance. Give service first. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. The realization that they had taken more than they had given. That they had received your patience, your understanding, your emotional availability without matching it in return. They began replaying moments they dismissed, words they softened too quickly, needs they assumed you would always put aside. What once felt normal now feels exposed. Confusion followed closely behind. They asked themselves why everything feels so wrong when nothing bad technically happened. They cannot name a single dramatic ending, yet their inner world feels like it is unraveling. That is because what left them was not an argument or a situation. What left them was the safety of being held without accountability. They are afraid now, my child. Afraid that they misjudged the depth of your importance. Afraid that what they assumed would always be there may not return in the same form. Afraid that they waited too long to choose differently, to speak honestly, to step into maturity. This fear does not yet know how to transform itself into action, so it circles as anxiety and restlessness. Their sleep is unsettled. Their thoughts loop. They feel an ache they cannot explain to others without sounding vulnerable, and vulnerability has never been easy for them. They try to distract themselves, but the absence follows them. Because your energy did not just fill space, it brought clarity. And now, without it, their inner noise is louder than ever. They are not collapsing because you left. They are collapsing because the imbalance can no longer hide. When you stopped compensating, the weight fell where it belonged. And it is heavy. They are coming face to face with parts of themselves they avoided while you were quietly holding things together. You're living in them now. Not just for you, but for the version of themselves they were around you. A softer self. A safer self. The one who felt understood without having to explain. They are beginning to realize that what they lost was not convenience, but connection that required care they did not fully give. Regret moves through them in waves. Not always clearly. Sometimes it disguises itself as irritation, sometimes as denial. But beneath it is the awareness that they underestimated the cost of inaction. They believed time would preserve what only intention could protect. And now time has done the opposite. It has revealed the fragility of what they took for granted. They feel smaller now than they did before. Not because you diminished them, but because your presence had been quietly lifting them. Without it, they are face to face with their own unresolved fears, their emotional immaturity, their tendency to delay hard choices. This confrontation feels like loss, and they do not yet know how to process it without spiraling. I want you to hear this clearly, my child. Your collapse is not your responsibility. Their awakening cannot be rushed by your sacrifice. You were never meant to stay so they would not have to grow. Love that requires one person to remain on whole is not love that can endure. You may sense their energy reaching for you now. Not always directly, not always consciously. A pull, a heaviness, a sudden thought crossing your mind. This is the echo of their confusion, not a sign you must return. Do not mistake their discomfort for your calling. Discomfort is often the birthplace of transformation, and it must be allowed to do its work. There is a tenderness here, yes. You can acknowledge their pain without re-entering the pattern that caused it. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. Understanding does not mean undoing what was divinely corrected. They are standing at a threshold now, though they do not yet see it clearly. One path leads to awareness, accountability, and change. The other leads back into familiar avoidance. The discomfort they feel is the invitation. What they choose next will determine whether the connection evolves or dissolves completely. For now, your task is not to rescue. It is to remain aligned. To let them feel what they need to feel without interfering with the process I've begun. You stepping back is not cruelty. It is clarity. And clarity is the only ground where something real can be rebuilt. Stay steady, my child. You are not cold. You are becoming clear. And clarity, though quiet, carries immense power. My child, there is more beneath the surface than what you have allowed yourself to remember. The release you are experiencing did not begin in this moment. It began long ago, in small, quiet decisions where you chose peace over honesty, loyalty over alignment, endurance over truth. This is the hidden backstory, and it is time for it to be revealed gently, without shame. You learned early how to adapt, how to sense what others needed before they spoke it, how to become what the moment required so nothing would break. You carried sensitivity like a skill, intuition like a responsibility. And because you were capable of holding more, you were given more. Not always asked, often assumed. There were moments you felt the misalignment, small tugs in your spirit you ignored because love told you to stay, because hope told you things would balance out later. You told yourself it was temporary. You told yourself that once circumstances changed, once they healed, once the timing improved, then it would feel mutual. But temporary became habitual, and habit slowly rewrote your sense of normal. I watched you negotiate with yourself, lowering expectations, postponing needs, softening truths so the connection could survive. You became fluent in understanding while quietly becoming unfamiliar to yourself. You did not realize it at the time, but each compromise took you a step further away from your own voice. This pattern did not come from weakness. It came from your depth, from your capacity to love deeply, to see potential, to believe in growth. But potential is not a promise, and love without reciprocity becomes labor. You were carrying not just your share of the connection, but the emotional weight of what it might become one day. There were signs you dismissed. Moments when you felt unseen but told yourself you were being patient. Moments when you felt alone even while connected. Moments when your joy dimmed slightly because it was inconvenient to express fully. These were not flaws in you. They were signals, and signals ignored too long turn into burdens. The hidden truth is this: you were not meant to be the one who holds everything together. You were not meant to be the emotional anchor while someone else floated freely. You were not meant to be the safe place others rested in while you never fully rested yourself. That arrangement was never sustainable, and deep down, your spirit knew it. There is also a lineage here, a learned pattern passed down quietly. You watched others survive by overgiving. You learned that being needed felt safer than being fully known. You learned that love was proven through sacrifice rather than shared responsibility. And so you carried that belief forward, thinking it was virtue rather than survival. I do not say this to accuse you. I say this to free you. You did what you knew how to do with the tools you had at the time. But now you are being given new tools. Discernment instead of endurance. Boundaries instead of self-erasure. Alignment instead of obligation. The hidden backstory also includes what you did not receive. There were moments you longed to be met emotionally, to be chosen clearly, to feel secure without having to manage everything. You rarely voiced these desires fully because you did not want to seem demanding. So you swallowed them, telling yourself that loving deeply meant accepting less. But love does not require self-neglect. Connection does not demand imbalance. What you were practicing was not divine patience, but quiet self-denial. And that is why your spirit grew tired even when your heart tried to stay hopeful. This is why the release feels both painful and relieving. You are not only letting go of a person or a path, you are letting go of an old agreement you made with yourself, the agreement that said you must carry more to be worthy of staying. That agreement is being revoked now. I want you to see how much strength it took to survive that season, how much grace you extended, how much wisdom you showed even when you doubted yourself. None of that was wasted. It taught you discernment. It refined your capacity. But it was never meant to be permanent housing for your soul. The backstory also reveals why I intervene. Had this continued, you would have slowly disappeared inside responsibility. Your joy would have become functional. Your calling would have been postponed indefinitely. And the world does not need a dimmed version of you surviving out of loyalty. It needs you whole. There were conversations that never happened. Truths that hovered at the edge of your time. You sensed they would change everything, and you were not ready to face that. So silence became a strategy. But silence cannot protect alignment forever. Eventually, it turns inward and becomes heaviness. I did not wait for you to collapse under that weight. I stepped in while you still had the strength to stand. What feels like loss is actually rescue from a future where you would have given everything and still felt unseen. This backstory matters because it explains the timing. Why now? Why suddenly? Why it could not be delayed any longer. Your spirit reached a threshold. One more compromise would have crossed a line that would have taken much longer to heal. You are not broken for staying as long as you did. And you are not cruel for leaving when you did. You stayed long enough to learn. You left early enough to remain whole. That balance is wisdom, not failure. Let this truth settle gently in you. You were not abandoning love. You were abandoning self-abandonment. And that is the beginning of true alignment. My child, when alignment begins, resistance often reveals itself. Not because you are wrong, but because something no longer has permission to feed. There were those close to you, perhaps not always obvious, who benefited quietly from you carrying what was not yours. And when you began to loosen your grip, their unease surfaced. This is where the interference entered. Not dramatic at first. Subtle. A shift in tone. A hint of guilt placed gently on your shoulders. Questions disguised as concern. Doubt framed as wisdom. These were not coincidences. They were reactions. Some people grew comfortable with your overfunctioning. Your availability made their lives easier. Your emotional labor reduced their responsibility. Your patience bought them time. And when you began to reclaim your energy, something in them felt threatened, not because you were harming them, but because you were no longer protecting them from growth. Jealousy does not always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like discouragement. Sometimes it sounds like you're changing where you used to be different. Sometimes it wears the mask of nostalgia, reminding you of who you were when you gave more than you should have. This is how interference tries to pull you back without appearing cruel. There were conversations you never heard. Thoughts formed in other minds about how to keep things the same. Not always malicious, but self-serving. When someone benefits from imbalance, balance feels like loss to them. And loss breeds resistance. I want you to understand something important. The moment you stopped rescuing, someone else had to feel their own weight. The moment you stopped compensating, their shortcomings became visible. And rather than rise immediately, some tried to subtly return the weight to you. You felt this as sudden doubt, a questioning of your decision, a pull to explain yourself, to justify your boundaries, to soothe discomfort that was not yours to soothe. That urge was not coming from love. It was coming from conditioning, from old patterns being activated by others' discomfort. This interference did not mean you were unsafe. It meant you were effective. You were disrupting a system that relied on your silence and sacrifice. And systems resist change even when change is healthy. Some of this interference came from unexpected places, from people you trusted, from voices you respected. They were not villains, but they were not aligned with where I am taking you. Their vision of you was shaped by who you were to them, not by who you are becoming. I saw the subtle manipulation, the way your compassion was used as leverage, the way your empathy was treated like obligation, the way your loyalty was mistaken for consent to remain small. These dynamics do not dissolve quietly when confronted by truth. They push back. This is why the release felt so urgent. Had I not intervened, the pressure to stay misaligned would have intensified. The enemy does not always appear as something dark and obvious. Sometimes it appears as familiarity that keeps you from moving forward. Do not internalize their reactions. Their discomfort is not evidence of your failure. It is confirmation that you are stepping out of a role that benefited them. When you stop playing a part, the story must change, and not everyone wants a new script. You may feel tempted to over-explain, to make sure everyone understands your heart, to soften the truth so it is easier for them to accept. My child, clarity does not require consensus. You do not need permission to obey me. I am teaching you to discern between love and access, between care and control, between concern and fear of losing influence. This discernment is a gift you will carry forward, protecting you from repeating old cycles. The interference you felt was not strong enough to stop what I have begun. It only revealed itself because its season of influence was ending. Light always agitates what thrives in imbalance. Stand firm in the quiet confidence of alignment. You do not need to argue. You do not need to defend. You do not need to return to old patterns to keep peace. Peace that requires self-betrayal is not peace at all. I am with you in this separation. I am guarding what you are becoming. And as resistance fades, clarity will take its place. My child, while you were questioning yourself, wondering if you were being too sensitive or too sudden, I was already at work. Quietly, thoroughly. Nothing escaped my sight. This is the part you could not see, the divine investigation that began the moment your spirit cried out under weight it could no longer carry. I listened to the conversations you were not present for. I weighed the intentions behind words that sounded kind but carried hidden agendas. I observed the moments when truth was withheld, when honesty was delayed, when choices were made for comfort rather than integrity. You did not imagine the imbalance. You sensed it because it was real. There were things said about you that were not said to you. Not always cruel, but not fully honest either. Narratives quietly formed that benefited others more than they honored you. Assumptions made about your availability. Expectations placed on your silence. I saw how your character was relied upon to absorb what others did not want to face. You wondered if you were misleading people, if your discernment had become clouded by emotion. My child, your discernment sharpened because you were finally listening to it. The discomfort you felt was not confusion, it was clarity arriving before your mind was ready to accept it. I traced the patterns back to the first moment you felt that small tightening in your chest. Back to the first time you said yes while your spirit whispered no. Back to the repeated cycle of overgiving followed by quiet disappointment. None of it was random. It formed a map, and that map led me straight to the truth. There were intentions that were not malicious, but they were not pure either. Comfort preserved at your expense. Stability maintained by your flexibility. Peace sustained by your restraint. These are subtle distortions of love, and they cannot survive in alignment. You were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people to meet you at the level you were already living. And when they could not or would not, you adjusted yourself instead. That adjustment became expected. That expectation became entitlement. And entitlement always resists accountability. I investigated the delays, the postponed conversations, the promises framed vaguely enough to avoid commitment, the emotional availability that appeared only when it was convenient. I saw how hope was used as a placeholder for action, how potential was used to excuse stagnation. This is why I intervened when I did. Because the longer something remains undefined, the easier it is to misuse. And you were being misused not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. Comfort that depended on you staying exactly where you were. I also examined your heart, my child. Not to accuse, but to heal. I saw where you doubted yourself unnecessarily, where you minimized your needs, where you rationalized behavior that quietly hurt you because you did not want to disrupt the connection. I saw the tenderness that made you vulnerable to imbalance, and I protected that tenderness. I did not want it hardened by resentment or disappointment. I did not want you to lose your softness trying to survive a dynamic that demanded too much of you. So I removed you before bitterness could take root. Every lie, every half-truth, every unspoken expectation was brought into the light. Not publicly, not dramatically, but decisively. Once truth is seen clearly, it can't be unseen. And once it is seen, alignment must follow. You felt the shift with the fog began to lift. Suddenly, things that once felt confusing made sense. Patterns became obvious. The emotional math no longer added up. That was not coincidence. That was clarity settling into place. I corrected the narrative around you, in places you were never invited to speak, in moments where your silence had been interpreted incorrectly. I did not need you to defend yourself. I became your defense. You are not wrong for trusting your discernment now. You are not overreacting. You are responding to truth after a long season of minimizing it. And truth, once acknowledged, demands movement. This investigation was not about punishment. It was about protection, about restoring proper order, about ensuring that what comes next in your life is built on honesty rather than endurance. I know you still feel tender. Exposure always leaves a softness in its wake. But that softness is not weakness. It is proof that your heart is still alive, still capable of deep connection, just no longer willing to pay the price of self-erasure. Rest in this knowing. Nothing that needed to be hidden can survive where I am taking you, and nothing that tried to benefit from your silence will have authority over your future. I have seen everything, and I am aligning everything. My child, once truth is acknowledged, the atmosphere cannot remain the same. What you are feeling now is not imagination. It is movement. The moment alignment was chosen, heaven responded. Quietly at first, but decisively. This is the spiritual shift, the point where what was once stagnant begins to rearrange itself without force. You may have noticed subtle changes already. A lightness in your chest where there was once constant pressure. A calm that arrives without explanation. A resistance to returning to old habits that once felt automatic. These are not coincidences. They are signs that the weight has shifted off your shoulders and onto the ground where it belongs. When you stopped holding what was not yours, the universe corrected its posture. Energy follows truth. And once truth entered, everything that depended on distortion lost its footing. Doors you were never meant to push open are closing on their own. Paths that required constant effort are fading. This is not loss. This is efficiency. I dispatched assistance the moment you chose alignment. Not loudly, not theatrically, but precisely. Timing began to change around you. Conversations you were dreading no longer materialize. Certain demands simply stop. Some people grew quiet, not because you withdrew, but because the axis they once had no longer worked. You may feel slightly disoriented by how little effort this requires now. That is because you were used to striving, used to pushing through resistance, used to carrying momentum by force of will. Alignment moves differently. It does not chase. It chags. It does not argue. It rearranges. I am recalibrating your environment to match your spirit. Where there was noise, there will be clarity. Where there was urgency, there will be rhythm. Where there was pressure, there will be permission to breathe. This shift is not dramatic because it is real. It is stable. It is lasting. Angels are adjusting timelines you thought were delayed. What you assumed was behind schedule was actually paused for protection. You were not meant to arrive exhausted. You were meant to arrive whole. And now that you are no longer bleeding energy into places that could not sustain you, momentum returns naturally. Notice how your intuition feels sharper now. You sense when something is misaligned almost immediately. You no longer need prolonged discomfort to recognize when something is not right. This is not hypervigilance. This is clarity restored. The shift is also happening within your body. Your nervous system is learning a new language. One where safety does not come from control. One where rest does not feel like abandonment. One where silence does not trigger fear. This recalibration takes time, so be gentle with yourself as your system learns peace. I am also shifting how others perceive you. Not by changing who you are, but by removing the distortion caused by over-availability. When you stop over-giving, your value becomes clearer. When you stop explaining yourself, your authority becomes visible. Some will respect this. Some will resist it. Both reactions are information. You may notice opportunities that feel strangely aligned. Not rushed. Not heavy. Not demanding proof of worth. These are invitations, not tests. They come with ease because they are built on truth, not compensation. What is leaving your life now is leaving without struggle because it no longer has legal ground. You did not have to fight it. You did not have to expose it publicly. You simply stepped into alignment, and misalignment could not remain. This shift also prepares the ground for reconciliation or release, depending on what truth produces. I am not forcing outcomes. I am creating conditions where only what is real can survive. Anything that returns must return transformed. Anything that cannot transform will quietly disappear. You may feel moments of grief surface unexpectedly. This does not mean the shift is wrong. It means your heart is catching up to what your spirit already accepted. Let the tears come without judgment. Grief is not resistance. It is processing. I am surrounding you with protection you cannot see. Not walls, but wisdom. Not isolation, but discernment. You will no longer need to learn lessons through prolonged pain. You will recognize them early and choose differently. The universe is responding to your alignment by becoming more responsive to you. Synchronicities increase. Resistance decreases. The need to explain yourself diminishes. This is what happens when you stop carrying what was never assigned to you. Stay present in this phase. Do not rush ahead looking for outcomes. The shift itself is the outcome. The clarity you feel is the reward. The peace that no longer requires justification is the confirmation. I am not done rearranging things on your behalf. This is only the beginning of the correction. What was once tangled is being untangled. What was once draining is being released. What was once delayed is being positioned. Trust the quiet movement, my child. Heaven does not need noise to work powerfully, and you do not need to struggle to stay aligned. Simply remain honest. Remain receptive. Remain still when stillness is offered. My child, truth does not rush, but it does rise. And what is rising now is clarity that cannot be undone. You are beginning to see with new eyes, not because circumstances changed dramatically, but because illusion lost its power. This is the moment where what once felt confusing starts to make sense without effort. Evidence is forming quietly around you. Small confirmations, subtle realizations, pieces connecting that once felt unrelated. You recognize patterns you could not name before. Behaviors that once felt tolerable now feel clearly misaligned. This is not bitterness. This is discernment finally free from denial. You are no longer fighting your intuition. You trust what you feel without immediately questioning it. When something feels off, you do not rush to excuse it. When something feels peaceful, you do not search for hidden danger. This balance is new, and it is sacred. It is the sign of truth settling into your nervous system. Conversations sound different now. You hear what is being said and what is being avoided. Promises without follow-through stand out clearly. Vague intentions no longer soothe you. You are not demanding perfection. You are recognizing consistency. And consistency is the language of truth. Protection has formed around you, not as isolation, but as clarity that prevents entanglement. You no longer absorb emotional weight that is not yours. You no longer feel compelled to manage outcomes that do not involve you. This boundary is not something you built consciously. It emerged naturally once truth took its place. You may notice that some people reveal themselves without confrontation. Their actions speak louder now because you are no longer filling in the gaps with hope. Where you once assumed the best to preserve connection, you now observe honestly to preserve alignment. This shift does not make you cold. It makes you clear. Truth rising also brings relief. You realize you were not asking for too much. You were asking in the wrong environment. You were not too sensitive. You were responding to subtle imbalance. You were not confused. You were overloaded. This clarity does not require you to announce anything. It does not need explanation. It simply changes your posture. You respond differently. You pause instead of overextending. You choose silence instead of self-betrayal. And in that quiet authority, truth speaks for you. Lies lose their grip when they are no longer needed for survival. You no longer need to believe potential over pattern to stay connected. You no longer need to reinterpret inconsistency as timing. The truth stands on its own now, and it is surprisingly gentle. You are also protected from repeating this cycle. The awareness you carry now will not allow you to ignore early signals again. Not because you are guarded, but because you are grounded. You will recognize when something asks too much too soon. You will feel when reciprocity is missing. And you will trust yourself enough to respond. What is rising now is not just truth about others. It is truth about you, about your worth, about your capacity, about your right to be met, not managed, chosen, not assumed, loved without being depleted. You may feel a quiet confidence emerging, not loud, not performative, yes, steady. You no longer need constant reassurance. You know what alignment feels like in your body now, and that knowing cannot be taken from you. This truth also acts as a filter. What is meant for you will recognize it and draw closer. What cannot meet you here will naturally fall away. You do not need to force separation. Truth does that work effortlessly. You are safe in this clarity. It will not abandon you. It will not confuse you. It will not demand that you shrink. It will guide you gently into spaces that honor who you are becoming. Stay attentive, my child. Not hyper-aware, not guarded, just present. Truth does not require vigilance. It requires honesty. And you are learning to live from that place now. The rising truth prepares the way for what comes next. It softens the heart that once resisted awakening. It confronts what can no longer hide. And it sets the stage for realization, regret, and choice in the other soul involved. My child, the awakening you sense stirring before is no longer subtle. It has reached the surface of their heart, and they cannot ignore it now. What once felt distant has become immediate. What once felt optional now feels fragile. The fear of losing you has moved from thought into reality, and it is changing them. They are seeing clearly for the first time, not through fantasy, not through open, through absence, through contrast, through the quiet realization that what they assumed was stable was actually sustained by your sacrifice. And now that sacrifice is no longer available, regret has sharpened their awareness. They remember moments they dismissed, opportunities they delayed, words they never said because they believed there would always be more time. They understand now that time does not preserve connection. Intention does. That intention was postponed too long. This awakening is uncomfortable for them. It strips away excuses. It removes the illusion that things would somehow resolve themselves. They feel exposed, not because you accuse them, but because truth arrived without needing your voice. The mirror has turned toward them, and they cannot look away. They fear that you are changing beyond reach. Not because you became unloving, but because you became clear. Your calm unsettles them more than anger ever could. Your lack of pursuit feels louder than confrontation. They realize now that you are no longer waiting in the same way, and that realization shakes something deep within them. They are asking themselves difficult questions. Why did I hesitate? Why did I assume presence instead of choosing it? Why did I lean instead of stand alongside? These questions do not come from punishment. They come from awakening. And awakening always feels like loss before it feels like growth. They feel the distance, even if it has not been spoken. An energetic boundary has formed, not to punish them, but to protect you. They sense that access to you now requires something different: honesty, maturity, effort. And they are standing at the edge of that requirement, unsure if they are ready, but unable to go back to sleep. Fear is motivating them now. Not the kind that panics, but the kind that clarifies. A fear of missing what mattered. The fear of repeating old patterns. The fear that this was their moment to rise and they almost let it pass. This fear is not meant to paralyze them. It is meant to awaken choice. They are beginning to see you as you truly are. Not as a constant source of comfort. Not as someone who will always understand without being met. But as a soul with depth, boundaries, and a destiny that does not pause indefinitely for indecision. This vision humbles them. They realize something important. That you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were not demanding certainty. You were asking for intention. And those requests feel heavier now because they can no longer be ignored or deferred. This awakening does not guarantee outcome. It guarantees awareness. What they choose to do with that awareness is still unfolding. But what has changed is irreversible. They cannot unsee the truth. They cannot unknow your value. They cannot pretend the connection did not require care they failed to give. You may feel them thinking of you more often now. Not always reaching out, not always speaking, but feeling. The bond has shifted from comfort to consequence. And consequence invites transformation. Do not rush to interpret their awakening as action. Awakening is internal before it becomes external. Growth takes time. Accountability takes courage. And not every awakened soul chooses change immediately. Your role is not to wait, watch, or hope. Your role is to remain aligned. Your steadiness is part of the lesson. Not as manipulation. Not as withdrawal. But as truth embodied. You staying grounded shows them what is required to meet you now. And whether they rise to that or not, the awakening serves its purpose. This moment is sacred, my child. Not because of what it promises, but because of what it reveals. You were never meant to convince someone of your worth. Your alignment does that naturally. And now, the fear of losing you has opened a door they must choose whether to walk through. Stay where you are. Do not lean back into old patterns to ease their discomfort. Let awakening do its work. Let fear refine into courage or reveal limitation. Either way, truth will complete what it has begun. My child, even now, without striving, without reaching, without explaining, you are influencing more than you realize. Your presence alone has become a turning key, not because you are doing something, but because you stopped doing what was never required of you. This is the sacred connection at work, the quiet power of alignment influencing destiny. Your prayers have shifted tone. They are no longer desperate. They are no longer bargaining. They are rooted, steady, surrendered. And heaven responds differently to surrendered prayers. They do not beg outcomes into being. They authorize truth to move freely. What you release in trust creates space for correction. The other soul feels this shift, not always consciously but deeply. Your calm becomes a mirror. Your silence becomes a signal. Your refusal to collapse back into old patterns becomes an invitation to rise or a revelation that they cannot. Either outcome serves truth. You may wonder how doing less can have such impact, but alignment carries weight. When you stop interfering with divine order accelerates. You are no longer blocking lessons meant for others by rescuing them from discomfort. You are no longer delaying growth by cushioning consequences. This is not abandonment. This is wisdom. Your presence has become anchored, not fluctuating based on response, not bending based on fear of loss. That anchoring stabilizes timelines. It clarifies decisions. It forces what is vague to become defined. Destiny responds to clarity. There is a reversal already underway. What once drained you can no longer access you. What once confused you no longer holds authority. The danger of remaining misaligned has ended. Protection has sealed what was vulnerable. You are no longer exposed to slow erosion. If reunion is meant, it will not return in imbalance. It will return transformed, accountable, and grounded, or it will not return at all. Either way, the outcome no longer threatens your peace. That is the reversal. You are safe regardless of the choice made by the other heart. What was once a test has become a truth filter. Only what is real can approach you now. Only what is mature can stay. Only what is mutual can grow. This is not a closing of your heart. It is the refinement of your destiny. You may feel a quiet strength settling into you. Not excitement, not certainty, but trust it. Trust that you will not abandon yourself again. Trust that alignment will guide you even when answers are incomplete. Trust that what is meant for you does not require self-betrayal to reach you. The blessing here is subtle but profound. You are no longer afraid of endings. You understand now that endings are often exits from misalignment, not failures of love. You are no longer afraid of stillness. You know it is where recalibration happens. This is restoration, my child. Not of the past, but of your authority. Not of what was familiar, but of what is true. Destiny is no longer pulling you through exhaustion. It is walking with you at your pace. As this message closes, let peace seal what hath been spoken. You did not lose direction. You lost distortion. You did not fall behind. You stepped out of what was never assigned to you. And because of that, what belongs to you can now recognize you clearly. Walk forward gently. You do not need to rush. What is aligned is already moving toward you. And nothing that requires you to disappear will ever be required again. I am with you. And what I have realigned, no one can undo. My child, now you are standing in the moment where the tide fully turns. This is the reversal you could not have orchestrated. The restoration that arrives not through effort, but through obedience. The danger you were once walking toward has quietly dissolved, not because you fought it, but because you stepped out of its path. What was draining you no longer has permission to draw from you. The slow erosion of your spirit has ended. The quiet heaviness that followed you into rest, into prayer, into silence has lifted. You may still feel echoes, but they no longer define your days. You are not recovering from a wound anymore. You are returning to yourself. Protection has sealed the places where you once leaked energy, where you once explained yourself endlessly. Clarity now speaks for you. Where you once bent to preserve connection, strength now holds its shape. You are no longer exposed to being misunderstood and overextended at the same time. I have covered you. Destiny has routed gently but firmly. Paths you assumed were fixed have shifted without collapse. Opportunities that required you to diminish yourself have lost their appeal. New directions do not feel frantic. They feel calm, intentional, and strangely familiar, as if you are remembering something rather than learning something new. This is restoration, not replacement. I am not filling the space with noise. I am filling it with alignment. What returns to you now does not ask you to prove your worth. It recognizes it. What approaches you now does not rush you. It respects your pace. This is how you will know it is from me. You may notice your joy returning in small ways. Moments of laughter that surprise you. Creativity stirring without pressure. Rest that actually restores. These are signs that your soul is no longer on defense. You are safe enough now to expand again. The reversal also means this. What once had power over you no longer does. Old triggers lose their intensity. Familiar patterns fail to hook you. You recognize when something is trying to pull you back into obligation, and you decline without guilt. This is authority reclaimed. If the other soul returns, it will not be to the old version of you. They will meet boundaries where there was once endless grace. Presence where there was once availability. Truth where there was once silence. And if they cannot meet you there, the restoration still stands. You do not lose by staying aligned. I am restoring your sense of timing. You no longer feel late. You no longer feel rushed. You understand now that delays protected you, and endings redirected you. You trust the pace of your becoming. That trust is part of the blessing. What was once confusing is now simple. Not easy, but simple. You know what drains you. You know what nourishes you. You know when to stay and when to step back. This clarity is a gift many never receive. Guard it gently. You are stepping into a season where effort matches reward, where giving is mutual, where love does not require you to disappear, where purpose does not exhaust you. This does not mean life will be without challenge. It means challenge will no longer come from misalignment. I am restoring your confidence in me. Not the loud kind, but the quiet assurance that I am guiding you even when the path bends. You do not need to see the full map. You only need to stay honest at each step. This reversal closes a door that once felt heavy to shut. You do not need to reopen it to check if it still hurts. It is finished, and what is finished no longer defines you. Stand in this restoration, my child. You did not lose anything essential. You were preserved, and what has been preserved will now be used not in survival, but in purpose. My child, come and rest here with me. This is the closing of what had been heavy, and the opening of what will be gentle. You have walked through release, through truth, through correction, and now you stand in alignment. Let me seal this journey with peace that does not fade when circumstances shift. You are no longer the one who must figure everything out. You are no longer required to carry clarity for everyone else. The burden of direction has lifted because direction was never meant to be carried, it was meant to be received. And now you are receptive again. I bless your mind with stillness. The racing thoughts that once searched for answers will quiet. The need to revisit old decisions will lose its grip. You will remember without reliving. You will understand without reopening wounds. This is healing integrated, not erased. I bless your heart with confidence, not arrogance, not hardness, but a deep, settled knowing that you can trust yourself again. You will no longer doubt your discernment when peace follows your decisions. You will recognize alignment by how little it costs you to stay true. I bless your future with clarity. What is meant for you will no longer hide behind confusion. It will approach you openly, steadily, without asking you to abandon yourself to receive it. You will not have to chase destiny. Destiny will recognize you. What you released will not return to drain you. And what returns, if anything returns, will do so transformed, accountable, and real. You will not repeat old cycles. You will not renegotiate boundaries you earned through pain. Wisdom has been etched into your spirit, and it will guide you gently but firmly. I bless your connections. Those who can meet you in truth will feel drawn closer. Those who cannot will drift without drama. You do not need to manage this separation. Alignment does it naturally. Love that belongs with you will feel safe, mutual, and unforced. I bless your purpose. It will no longer require you to bleed quietly to prove devotion. Your calling will expand you, not shrink you. It will energize rather than exhaust. You will serve from overflow, not obligation. There is a new rhythm settling into your days. You will notice it when rest feels restorative instead of guilty. When joy appears without being earned. When peace becomes your default rather than your reward. This rhythm is your inheritance. You are not starting over. You are starting aligned. Everything you learned will serve you now, without costing you your identity. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Even the pain refined your discernment and strengthened your boundaries. I want you to hear this clearly, my child. You are safe to move forward. You are safe to trust again. You are safe to let good things reach you without suspicion. Alignment has become your protection. As you carry this message with you, let it remain alive. If it has spoken to you, if it has named something true in your spirit, let others find it too. Stay connected, share what resonates, and allow this word to continue its work beyond this moment. And if your heart is led, write in the comments, I choose alignment, as a seal of what has been completed here. I'm blessing your next steps, not with noise, not with urgency, but with certainty that grows as you walk. You will not be confused by every turn. You will feel guided even when the path bends. You did not lose direction. You released distortion. You did not fall behind. You stepped out of what was never assigned to you. And because of that, your destiny now has room to arrive fully. Go forward in peace, my child. What is meant for you is not fragile. It will meet you where you are whole, grounded, and finally free.